there was a bunch of Chinese escape China to go to Hong Kong, and my dad was one of them. So what he literally did, he swam 24 hours. He landed Hong Kong with zero, basically no pennies in his pockets, nothing. When we're running a business, if you want to make it successful, you really have to give it 150% of your time and energy and all the efforts. So when I started this business, my own executive search business become profitable after the third and fourth month. Currently, AI will offer a lot of support and resources at a very minimal cost for you to venture whatever ideas.
Almost no cost.
Almost no cost. This is basically wide open. I think the biggest wake-up call for me is when I was doing this body check, and all of a sudden, the doctors say, you have a heart problem.
How old were you?
I was early 30s.
What would be your message to all the aspiring current and future founders?
Do it. I think all really boils down into we are in an era that we have tremendous opportunities with the use of technology. You can be a business founder without a team. You can be just on yourself running $1 million company, which is very true.
Welcome back to The Cost of It. This is Wajeeh. Today, we have someone who holds a very interesting seat, and he has been an investor himself, a founder, and an executive coach. Welcome, Gavin, to The Cost of It. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. So, Gavin, tell us about yourself a little bit.
I can share the professional version of myself as a starter. So there were 3 parts of my professional journey. So now, currently, I'm a founder of an executive search firm. So for those who is not too familiar with executive search, so we basically help companies to look for executive talents. And we primarily helping startups, scale-ups, and investors on their growth journey, literally. So as you can imagine, when the company grows from 0 to 10, we require very different skills from, managing a company from 100 to 1,000. So as the company grows, we help them to look for the right talents to suit their growth journey. That's the first hat. And the second hat I'm holding is 2 years ago, I started my own private investment firm. So we do invest in pre-seed, early stage, and pre-IPO ventures. There are 4 pillars we're focusing on: AI, FinTech, health tech, and also consumer tech. So these 4 pillars are deeply resonating with me personally and as well professionally as well. The third hat I have is my executive coach hat. So since we do the talent, we are part of the ecosystem as an investor. We partner with those startup companies. And I just feel there is a passion for me that I would love to support the young entrepreneur who looking into venturing into this journey. And I wish I had mentors or coaches when I was younger, started my own company. So that's why I'm doing it now. So I'm helping young entrepreneur, especially for those who's venturing into their own business or running their own business and growing their business to the next level. So these are the 3 parts.
Wonderful. You're young, by the way. So you're in the position where you put people on the spotlight, like founders, investors. You're the guy who makes things happen and put the people on the front, right? So how did it start? Because this is a very interesting role, because most of the people, most of the founders, if they're founders, they don't know what happens inside the rooms where there are investors and what they are talking about. And where investment talks are happening, the founders are the other side. So you have been on the both sides of the table, right? How did it start? Like, how did it come to your mind to get into this type of domain? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
That's a great question. Honestly, I never thought about being in the executive search business. If I actually backward a little bit my career, I started as a management consultant. So when I was graduating from a grad school in Chicago, I go after the typical path. All my friends, including me, was looking for investment banking offers and management consulting offers. So I thought maybe that's it. So this is something I want to go after it. So I started as a management consultant at the very beginning. Now I spent 6-7 years in corporate. So I was shifting between corporate and my own business back and forth in the last 25 years. There was one incident that was kind of caught me in attention, and I was actually in a hiring manager position. I was running the strategy and M&A team for a Fortune 50 company. I was managing 6 countries in Asia, Japan, Korea, Australia, India, Southeast Asia, and I was 29. And I got this call from a headhunter. And he was presenting this new job to me called head of strategy for, one of our competitors. And I was like, great, so tell me a little bit more about that. And he was mumbling, he was reading from the job description. And the more I asked about the specific and the details, I realized he had no clue about what a strategist or strategy consultant do. And I thought, wow, this is a huge opportunity. I know the space, and this guy was calling from a very reputable search firm, and they have no idea what they're representing. And I had started and to have this idea that maybe it would be a good idea for me to start a business like that. So that's actually the very beginning. But there was a lot of preceding stimulus from my family, from my own personal upbringing that brought me to this point saying, hey, when I was 29, there's nothing to lose, that you should actually try everything and give your...
This is great, actually, because most of the founders, I ask this question, like starting a business, starting a venture, doing something for your own self. It requires a lot of courage.
Yes.
You go through a lot of failures and you see challenges. It's just like jumping off a cliff and assembling the plane, and you have to take off before you hit the ground, right? That's how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur as a founder, right?
Exactly.
So from where did it come? Like, did it come from your family? Because you started as a management consultant, very good corporate career, right? So what made you switch from that to business? That's one. And then from where this mindset came, was there any inspiration in your family, around you, any mentor that you look at? Like, how did it start?
Yeah, so my family has been my inspiration. So the story I just shared, it was basically telling, hey, this is the one particular wake-up call that, hey, you should think about there was a space opportunity out there in the market. But when I grow up, you probably hear about the examples in Asia. You probably appreciate that in Asian family, a lot of parents looking at the success of the kids. There are only a couple of paths. You can either be an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, or a failure. And for my dad, it's even simpler. It's business owner and failure. And so there was no other choice. There was no third path for me personally. And I'll tell you why. I came from a second generation refugee family. So I started with a very humble beginnings. So what if you're familiar with Hong Kong's histories and back in the 50s and 60s, there was a bunch of Chinese escape China to go to Hong Kong. And my dad was one of them. So what he literally did was he swam 24 hours by himself from China to Hong Kong. And when he landed, luckily, obviously he wasn't get caught. And so that he met my mom and had me. But he landed Hong Kong with zero, basically no pennies in his pockets, nothing. And he started working for somebody, and he started working in a garment factory. So he was a tailor back then, no money, trying to raise the family, because he worked so hard that when the business owner retired, he sold his business to my dad.
Okay.
And then my dad started becoming an entrepreneur. And then he did it very well and pretty successfully. And then he's expanded the business, and he have, the second factory, the third factories, and they have his own boutique shops in Hong Kong and China. So that was the environment I was growing up. I still remember when I was a kid, 4 or 5 of us, including my brother and sisters, was crammed in a very little rooms, like 10, 15 square meters. And I felt great about it. And I have this beautiful picture. I see my dad working super hard to build this business and to raise a family. He also provides for lots of families. So we have hundreds of workers. I still remember that factory was my playground. We didn't go to park when I was young. That was my playground. So I was doing hide and seek under the sewing machines and all that, and with my brother and sisters. So it was my childhood. And I see the beautiful part of running a business. It provides for the family, for others. And I also see a very beautiful picture that when my dad and my mom, two souls getting together and building a venture together. And it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen when I was a kid. It's just amazing. But at the same time, I also witnessed the sacrifices they made for such a success. So I never really spent a lot of time with my parents when I was young because they are all very busy working. We have no weekends. So when all my friends going to play and they have their toys and all that, no, it's for me, it's pretty much staying in the factory with my parents, working together. So that was my childhood. So I see there was a cost and sacrifice when we're running a business. If you want to make it successful, you really have to give it 150% of your time and energy and all the efforts. So since young, I have this upbringing, seeing, I would say probably the more realistic view of being a business owner, that I see the beautiful part of it, and I also see the sacrifices of it. So when I grow up, and as my dad expected, so when I was choosing my career, I was thinking there was always an urge from the inside that I want to do something similar to my dad. And so they actually have been a big and huge inspiration for myself.
So that's in your blood.
That's in my blood,
right.
exactly.
So when you started the business, and this is very important, and I'll deep dive on the point where you said that it has a trade-off. If you want to be successful, you have to sacrifice a lot of different things, and most of the time you don't have a lot of time to spend, right, with like a normal people. So in terms of building the business, because now you are at a place where you help the founders, you help the startups to get the money, raise the money, right? So when you were starting, of course, in the starting days, you have to take care of everything by your own before you prove that, right? So what was the point? How long did it take for you to establish this business that you started? And tell us about the journey, like starting the business. After that, what kind of experiences you had?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess every business have their own seasons. So when I started my business, it was back in 2007, I would say. And it was the time when China was growing.
Yes.
And they just entered the WTO. And after 2 decades after that, we see the takeoff of China. I was so blessed to be at the junctions and witnessing all this growth. So when I started this business, my own executive search business became profitable after the 3rd and 4th month. And after that, we become financially self-sustaining.
That's pretty quick.
Yes. So for my own business, we didn't actually look for any financing. So we pretty much organic growth on our own. And which is for those who was actually at seeing it there, whatever country you're in, what business you're in, if you see this white space, that you are one of the niche players out there, by all means go for it. Not all business need financing. But now when I'm working with founders, now the world is getting a little bit more complicated and it's more complex business model. You have AI, so a lot of those will require investments in R&D, data analytics and all that. So a lot of founders, they have this term called rebirth. So they've been running their business for a couple of years, and now with AI, they need to transform the business with AI. And generally, they will need a little bit more capital. And so I think there was no cookie cutter solutions for that. And you have to choose a path that would work best for you, for your business at the end of the day. For me, I never really actually need financing. But for all the founders and most of the founders now, they are really taking, prioritizing fundraising as one of the key tasks they are doing. Especially now, I think 30-40% of my clients is actually early stage. So one of the key challenges for founders was, how can I get their pre-seed funding? And once they have this market profit fit proven, and how I'm going to secure a Series B, and how I'm going to secure a Series C, and then so on and so forth. So that become an almost imperative for them to think about it if you want to scale in the era of AI. I think you have to adapt to whatever that might work for your business.
That is absolutely correct. And like before, like I think AI and the boom of AI things, how they're changing, Asia was sort of considered as the back end, right? But now I think in the next decade, we are going to see enormous startups, founders coming from this region, right? When you started coaching these startups, what was the particular region that you started from? And what kind of startups you started with? Can you tell us a little bit about the Asian market where you are and what's your vision with this ecosystem?
Absolutely. So for my background, my blood, I'm stealing your word. I've been always in consumer tech. So when I started my own business, I help a lot of consulting firms, as a matter of fact. So I worked with McKinsey, the Boston Consulting Group, Accenture. So literally all the first and second tiers consulting firms are all my clients. That was the very beginning of my business journey. Then it very naturally allowed a consultant to move into the space of private equity and venture capitals and startup, of course. And then we have all these big tech giants in Asia. We have Alibaba, we have Tencent, and we have like the equivalents in Southeast Asia. So the landscape has evolved in the last decades or so. And so did my business. So how I started was it's almost a logical move for me moving from professional services consulting to investment. And when I started serving private equities or venture capital, most of my clients are actually consumer tech or consumer lifestyle. One of my clients was actually one of the private equity firms under the LVMH group. So what they basically invest in anything to the broadest sense if you defined it in lifestyle consumers. So coffee shop, pet shop, clothes, and online business, e-commerce. It was a wide range. And I started with that and working with them for a number of years. So that's my DNA. Now, as the entire startup scale-up scene developed, in the last few years, we see there is a lot of conversations about the tokenization of assets. So FinTech become a very important part of it. And clearly you have different conversations among different countries, but that overall, the trend is there. When US come up with the Genius Act, everybody listened. So that's happening. And with AI, one area that I'm personally particularly interested in is actually health tech. And with the global phenomenon, people are feeling more lonely than ever because of social media, because of AI, and people don't even actually need to go out and date and have their ChatGPT and GPT as a sole partner. It's a phenomenon that's happening. So one company is that we invest primarily focusing on helping people to resolve their loneliness, especially for remote worker. So people who have, working in a home office, they will be able to connect with a lot of people with very similar situations around the world through webcam, through some deep thinking sessions together online. So these are the areas that I think would be, upcoming in the next era or so. Without saying, I think AI and all the adjacencies around AI would be one of the topics that a lot of investments will go in as well. I was talking to one of the venture capital clients earlier on, and they would say, if anything your business have to do with AI, I'm interested. As opposed to 10 years ago, they were like, oh, it's okay. I invest 100 deals, only 2 deals works. That's fine with us. But now they are more selective in terms of how company adopt AI, deployed AI, and make sure that AI was part of your repeatability equation when you scale a business.
Yeah, and a lot of friends I see on LinkedIn as well, they've put AI with their names just to be going with the trend, right? Yeah, so yeah, it's everywhere. And I think it's incredibly simpler now because I worked on an AI project in 2018, right? So it was before ChatGPT.
So you were the early adopters.
Yeah, I just built something, and when I used to tell the people about the LLM, about this stuff, they say, no idea what it is, right? But now a normal man who is not a computer graduate, they know everything about AI, and things are getting faster. So the time to build the product, it took 6-8 months, years to build a very small application. But now with the help of AI, they can make it really quickly. So I think the direction that we're going is great. It's going to accelerate a lot of things. But what do you think? Right now, I have been in this wave of blockchain as well, where we saw meme coins, where we saw NFT marketplaces, a lot of different things, right? But the blockchain was built to be the future of finance. Similarly, the AI is built to help the human make things faster, effective for the normal operational stuff. What do you think, considering the startups that you're seeing these days, where are we heading with AI and blockchain? Do you think they're going to be changing the way the world works right now, or what is your thought process? Or it's going to kill the jobs? Like, how do you see that? Yeah.
That's a big topic. I would imagine there's a lot of debates, and they're one
disruptive and
and it kills all the jobs. And we're going to have a universal payments and all that from the governments, etc. And there's another perspective looking at that AI is going to increase drastic, increase in productivities, and there will be. Even Elon Musk recently came out and said, we don't need the job in the future. So there are a positive and negative sides of AI. But I think for me personally, both perspectives hold truth. And I guess as an individual or as a business owner, that you really need to look at which side of the equation you're standing. Now, I work with a lot of enterprise SaaS company. They literally very successful. They scale up pretty much from early stage to now, I think Series B and C and keep getting their fundings and all that. But because of AI, they pretty much face a lot of challenges because that the coding, the programming are now democratized. Now, with somebody, no computer science background, no mathematics, no statistics, I created my own digital twin and just doing my coaching. So I trained my digital twin, Gavin, who have my wisdom and who have my voice as well, I clone my voice, and will be able to offer similar advice to founders on a subscription. Now, in the past, it takes years for companies to build a moat around them, to build a software, build an application that can sell for. So that would be some disruption, clearly. And if you are in that business, I think that would be a interesting perspective look at how you are going to adapt and adopt AI faster. And a lot of time, our customers nowadays, I personally feel that they're not necessarily going out to only the features, but it's really what are the human needs, the values that you're providing to them. Features you can replicate fairly easily nowadays with AI. For somebody like myself, I can create my own app. That means all of you can do that. But if you are an individual, and I'm sure some of your audience might be working for a company or they're thinking about having the business, I think this is one of the most exciting times to start your own business. Now, take my own business as an example. Now, in the past, the traditional way of scaling my business in executive searches, we scale the teams. So I, Gavin, have a couple of client relationship that brings revenue to the company. So the more headcount, the more senior headcounts I engage, the more revenue I can replicate. But nowadays, I can literally, I did actually made an applications that they can help me to filter and screen all the sales leads. And I don't need 10 people to do the sales and knock on the doors and clients. I can actually have an AI to support me. So that helped me to drastically reduce my bottom line cost, right, structure. In the past, I need a lot of analysts and researcher. Now, so when I was an analyst, when I first started, I would go to LinkedIn and look at the right candidates and all that. But nowadays, actually, I have an app that could do the first filtering and screening for me. Now, they're all pretty much running at zero cost, right? So if you are an entrepreneur or somebody who's thinking about building a business, currently AI will offer a lot of supports and resources at a very minimal cost for you to venture whatever ideas.
Almost no cost.
Almost no cost. This is basically wide open. And I am excited to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, let's see. And I just wanted to quote you that we also launched a product built on AI without any developers. We launched it in Dubai, Singapore. It's making money. So it's for restaurants, right?
Absolutely.
So,
yes.
When you can relay the thoughts, when you learn how to talk to AI, that's the challenge that right now most of the people are facing. But I think eventually with time, it would become more intelligent and you can do a lot. So I'll take you to the technology business side, right? So as you mentioned that nowadays, it's very it's transforming every day. We're seeing things changing every single month. There are new things coming in. So founders, entrepreneurs, or people who want to start their business, there are certain things so the first thing is that they have to come up with an idea which actually can solve a problem. And with that, most of the people just try spending their whole life inventing the color blue. But you don't have to do that. You just have to do something better, something a little better than what it is. And that's how you launch your product, right? So that's the first part. Then building the product, doing the marketing, and then going for, let's say, the capital expansion, right? So since you started your business by generating the revenue very quickly, so seeing the founders who just have an idea looking for fundraising, who spend everything in the development, how do you coach and what's your thought process about the founders on the technology side? What kind of process they should be looking at currently with these trends and everything?
So that's a very good question. So based on some of the conversation I have with investors, PE or VCs now, with the end of QT and there's a lot of cheap money, it's being tightened. So we have actually walked into an era that free money is it's more selective. When I started my business, it was very easy for a startup to go to a venture, and as long as you you have a good idea and your founder's background was actually pretty impressive, that you pretty much actually can kind of secure somewhat of fundraising, at the very early stage. And then you prove yourself. Now you figured a lot of investors are getting more selective. And that's a more consistent message I hear from the investment community. So there are a couple of things that they mentioned. One is they really want to look at the numbers trajectory. So what I mean by that is your revenue, your product productivity, or if you're not profitable yet, what's the trending of your numbers?
So revenue is the key, right? Without the revenue, you can't go for the fundraise. Is that correct?
Exactly. Now, that's part of the equation. Revenue is important. Why? Because revenue is an indication or indicator that the business
to do the mathematics.
You do the mathematics, and you have proven your product market fit. Because somebody was actually buying from you, and you addressed a market need with your product, and people are willing to pay for it. What's better is that you have an MRR or ARR, which is the annual recurrent revenue. Somebody's willing to pay you on an ongoing basis. Now, that all goes to the revenue. That, as an investor, if business come to me showing me a recurrent cash flow and revenue, I would be spending a little bit more time on that, which is very interesting. It sounds very obvious, but I have received pitches over the years. There were founders who have this great idea. I have this early success. I partnered with Microsoft and Google's and all these logos on the pitch deck. And then there was no revenue model in it. Now, that's not the only criteria, clearly, when you look for a good potential company. But now it's getting a little bit more important if you, at least you have a look at it. And going back to your question, revenue is a good indication of your product market fit. But what's really actually more important for a business is your cash flow. If you started making money, it's the cash flow that keeps your business alive. Now, I personally learned it in a very painful way when I started my business. It's the third or fourth year when I run my business, and I have great top line. So I have this spreadsheet showing the forecast, revenue coming on time. There is just one problem. I never really planned cash flow. And that was one of the biggest learning I had when I was first started my business. Because at one point, I started my business 2007 and 2008 was financial crisis. That was probably the worst time.
You were at the peak of that time frame. Yeah.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden, within a very short period of time, a lot of my clients failed to pay us on time. Now, we deliver, we did a good job, but we don't get a payment. And that was one of the pivot moment as a founder for myself to rethink how I should run my strategy. So one thing I would also look at as an investor, going back to your questions, is when founders looking for funding, fundraising, when on the revenue model, I would probably look at both revenues and also cash flows. If whether or not it is profitable or not. I think those are very important indicators and getting more important these days. That's the numbers is one of the criteria, but there are also others. What about very early stage companies? They haven't actually proven themselves yet, right? So there are a couple of criteria we look at. One is the founder's background. So if the founders have already exited the company before and they have huge credentials behind them and you know what he's doing, that definitely adds a little bit points there. And of course, what's the story? Some inspirational, like SpaceX, for example.
But these are huge, yeah.
These are huge, right? So you will need to show your investor some indication that you don't just have a great idea, but you have proven it somehow, or somehow you have already generating market interest in dollar terms. So I think those are the key elements looking at. I love the fancy presentation, don't get me wrong.
Very, very impressive points. And I'll take you back to the point where you mentioned about the product market fit, right? So a founder is not a Superman, right? So he or she potentially couldn't have all the superpowers, right? So let's say for a person to come up with an idea, build it, launch it, sell it, all of these qualities. So in the founding team, how do you see and evaluate that the team or the founder? Do you think one founder could do all these aspects? Because that's where they stuck, right? If they're good at building, when it comes to marketing, when it's come to selling, they kind of are stuck because they're not good at it, right? So do you think there's kind of combination that should be in the founding team as an investor? How do you look at that aspect, or how does that work? Yeah.
That's a great question. And honestly, it really depends what business you're in. Some business simply need a combination of different skill sets.
Let's say it's a technology
Let's say if
business.
It's a technology company,
yeah.
right? You need somebody who knows the technology, the products, the R&D, the tech part, right? You need somebody who probably understand the market, the commercialization of your product, somebody who understand the customer needs. And you probably need somebody who, in the operations, how to pull this off at the end of the day. And I think all of these skills sets are very important. If you were talking some deep tech and technology companies, ideally, you should have a combination of skills. Either you have it in one particular person as a founder, you have it all, which is very rare. Or you have a team, especially your core team member or co-founding members would complement you as founders with the relevant skill set. So those are very important. I think there's no one way is better than the other. When I started, it was all by myself. I still remember I'm doing the client engagement, I'm doing the execution, I'm buying my coffee myself and doing my name card design. So it's all in one, but that's my business. And I don't need a lot of skill sets in executive search compared to technology, for example. So there are uncompromisable skill set when you were looking at certain, like FinTech, for example. Clearly, you would need some product know-hows there. If you are in a SaaS enterprise business software, you clearly would need the product and R&D and also the commercial team as well, right? So I think it is important to really depends on what industry, what companies you're running at the moment. But there was one thing that I would like to highlight, and I learned actually from my own personal experiences. If you are in a situation, a lot of founders, they might not have the privilege to start a company with other co-founding members or a huge team member that complements the skill set. So naturally, they will be Mr. All-in-One from day one. One of the biggest risks a lot of founders I've seen is that they spread themselves too thin, too early. I was almost there in the second or third year of running my business. I was doing professional services and private equity, and I know this industry so well. But then all of a sudden, all the world tells you, hey, you should go to EdTech, you should go to FinTech, you should do game tech.
Game tech.
And they, a lot of capital going in this space. Yes, right. But then I was almost tempted to spread myself too thin. I say, when I meet a client from a game tech industry, and they say, oh, what are the track record that you have? Oh, I know. We are all familiar with those pitches. And when you're a founder, you almost assume you are all in one. But one of my key learning and my advice for founders who doesn't have multiple founding members or just they have the business by themselves, try to start small. It's actually better to be a niche player, being everything, everyone, everywhere. At the end of the day, you will backfire because the client will figure out that you don't actually know game tech, but you will be a lot more confident selling your business when you are doing your niche. You know your niche, right? So it is absolutely okay to be small, and it's absolutely okay to be patient with yourself and your business.
And you picked up a really important point about almost there, right? So most of the great ideas, they just fail because the founders, they burn out, right? So they invest, they put a lot of energy, time, but of course consistency, because I think a product is your brainchild, a company is your brainchild. It can't just be born and just run, right? It has to grow. You have to groom it. It will take time naturally. So in terms of the struggling in the startup, right? So because I come from a technology background, so I can now say confidently that with the help of AI, building your idea, getting it to the market, trying to get the product market fit is no longer a challenge. If you know English, you can do it. You can just get it done through AI as well to test it out. But when it comes to scaling the product, doing the expansion, this is where I've seen a lot of great projects running out of, funds. They just, burn out. They look for investors, but without revenue, investors don't invest, right? So in your experience, what is the point where most of the founders, they burn out, and what advice you would like to give them so that they could navigate through that phase and make it to that almost there, Yeah.
That's a beautiful question. I think the best way to tackle burnout is to prevent it. So there are always signs, there are always whispers before that happened. And I can tell you my personal stories a little bit later. And I was almost at the verge of being burned out or having depression. But going back to your questions as a founder, right? It is almost the temptations that they spread themselves too thin, they think too big, but they have very limited execution power. So at the end of the day, who's going to take the share of burden? Themselves. So they would take a lot more than they could possibly afford. So I think one of the things I would advise founders to prevent into walking or being into a burnout situation is that you have to be very aware and conscious when it starts to happen. I can share with my personal story.
Yeah.
So during that time, financial crisis, which is actually, a very interesting, it's a blessing in disguise. But during that time, we are running out of cash flow because the clients have failed to pay. And I started to, I should probably do, instead of 10 things, maybe I should do 100 things. And I started, because I need to do 100 things, I only have 24 hours a day. So what I do basically is I started to cancel some of my family gatherings. Let's deprioritize it. That's not the important. Let me cancel my tennis session. I love tennis, and that give me the sparkles and all that. Let me cancel that. And then, before you know it, all of a sudden, after a couple of months in a year, I realized, look at my calendar. There is nothing left except work. That's actually pretty scary. Now, I think the most scary part is you don't realize it when you're running the show. This little compromises, let's cancel this session. Let's forget about the dinner. Let's not having the weekend. Let's just wake up 5 o'clock in the morning and doing a client pitch, right? All these little compromises all add up. And then before you know it, you feel why all of a sudden that my life is so dry. So I was reaching at a point where I have sleepless night. So I couldn't fall asleep for a couple of months. And I woke up 3, 4 in the morning and couldn't fall asleep again because now I was actually in a panic mode as a founder. And I was on the verge of being burned out and not even knowing it. I think the biggest wake-up call for me is when I was doing this body check, and all of a sudden, the doctors say, you have a heart problem. I was like, what?
How old were you?
I was in my 30s, early 30s, right? So, and I have absolutely healthy track record. So I was like, what happened? And that was really a wake-up call. And then there was a red flag coming out from my health record, and I cannot fall asleep. And I feel there is a drastic, first gradual, then drastic drop in my productivity. It becomes so obvious that you cannot ignore it anymore. So that was the moment I put a stop. It was a break, almost. And I really have taken a moment and a step back to look at my business and my life. Why I am here? It's what I have done. What could I have done differently, right? I think the most scary part is a lot of founders wasn't aware that's coming. So that's why there was a lot of burnout. So there was actually a research saying that over 82% of the founders feel burnout or depression to different extents when in the first 3 years when they started their own business. This is actually stunning statistics. So I think I would personally not underestimate the stress that were coming out from running a business. But it all started, the little things, the little compromises, the little, say yes to everything, to your clients, so I think that's the start. So basically a 3-step approach. I didn't know that way. I figured it out. I summarized my learning after that painful, soft burnout. I reset, I refresh, and I refill. So I put a pause on whatever I'm doing. So a couple of tough decisions I've made. I walk out from clients that could potentially give us a lot of, financial upside. I have to stop scaling up my team because I think the team, if you scale a team without knowing why you're doing it and without a meaning and intention behind it, it would burn your cash faster than whatever. And you need to put a stop on that one. So what basically I did was I have to audit my business and my personal life and find out what causes that little burnout, right? So I think that's one. I reset, I pause. Second, a lot of people at this moment, they are rushing into, let's refill with something. So maybe this doesn't work. Maybe I try a different idea. Maybe this product was just not good enough. Let us just develop an idea. That was actually the moment that you just stop thinking about. There was a period between refilling your cup. There was always a restoration period. This is where I think I personally, as a founder, I stop and I pause. And I pretty much leave almost my cup 80% empty. And during that time, it took me almost a year. And that's, to me, is a recovery stage. That was almost a 12-month recovery. And the only thing, you guess what I do every day when I wake up in the morning? The only thing I do is not checking my email, not checking my mobile. The only thing I do is I wake up, I ask myself, what are the things that would make me happy today? And I'm just doing that. So it could be some days they may say, hey, daydreaming, just doing nothing. There are sometimes, hey, maybe I just want to take a rest and take a break and doing nothing. There are sometimes, hey, I want to cook myself a good brunch. So there are always things that gives you sparkle in life. And as a founder, when you are kind of slowly creeping into this burnout stage, a lot of chances are you are sacrificing too much things that will make you sparkle in life, and start thinking about it and redoing it. So I pretty much ask the same question every day, and I do exactly what the answer I gave myself. If it's doing nothing, that's okay. That's fine. So that's the restoration stage.
That's a great breakdown of, different phases that you shared. So thank you so much for sharing that for all the audience. One particular question. So let's say in this burnout, I always say that business have good and bad, not bad days, good and hard days, right? So every business has it, right? So in those hard days, there are two options, two routes to go, right? Either you just stop it, change it, and then move on, or you keep consistently focusing and trying to solve it either this way or the other way, you would eventually make it, right? Partnerships in the startups, how do you see them? Because you started your business all alone by yourself. Have you been partnered with anyone, and how do you see partnerships? Do they add value for the startups, or they could be dangerous for the startups?
I value the idea of partnerships, and because I genuinely believe each of us, each of the founding members or individuals have something unique to bring onto the table. But I think one thing that what is really more important is, before looking for partnership, I would suggest founders to have a need analysis or intentional analysis, analyzing why you need a partner. Is it because of an absence of skill set, or if it's just you need somebody to share the burden, or there are certain things that somebody was doing better than you are, probably you need to delegate. So that need and intentioned analysis is very important before you go out and seek for partnerships. Now, I see success either way. So solopreneur, and they start their own business all the way through, and partnerships, right? And it's amazing. They secure fundings and, now pre-IPO. So I know a couple of cases like that. The key really is that why you need a partnership, and how do your partner be able to complement the skill sets that you lack as a business. And that is actually a very mature way to think of as a business owner, because ultimately you cannot be everything, everyone. And that's the reality, especially your company is moving into a scale-up stage. It's just not realistic. So it makes sense for you to think about partnership and what kind of partners you bring in. Could be the investor, people who are a silent partner, they don't get involved in the operations, they provide the capital, or somebody who just have so deep their product knowledge that would be able to compensate your business ideas. So there are always there are different paths to the goal. Yeah.
So you think both can be beneficial at all ends. So yeah, that's great. In terms of the scale of the funding, right? So let's say the scale of the growth of the startup, some of the companies, some of the firms, they keep on, let's say, 10 people for whole their life, right? And then some from 10 people, they grow to 1,000, 10,000 people as well. What is that? What's that thinking? Is that the founder? Is that the team? What have you seen? Is like you have probably been part of a lot of companies that you've seen grow, right? So what is that factor that keeps the company remain at that same place, or the companies who just go? crazy fast in the growth?
That's $1 million question. At the end of the day, this is an art. You really have to strike a balance between two things. And when you started, of course, a small team works perfectly. But when you scale up, you would just need the numbers to sustain the growth, or shooting for humanly impossible goal that's set for investors. You would need the team to support you. I think it is important to keep track of your finances. So there are two parts of it. One is the cash flow, the finance investment, the financial investments. So because every dollar you invest in people in your payroll, are they bringing value? Sometimes not financially, it could be non-financial, right? So are they bringing relevant values that you need for your business? And that's the time that you should look about scaling up business. Now, I made the same mistake when I started, because I started pretty smooth sale. So our company was profitable the first 3 months. Then all of a sudden, how am I going to spend the money, right? So that's the question. So I started to hire people. I started to do multiple things. And then I hired too fast and I made hiring mistakes. So, and literally, I also mix my personal judgments and also professional. So I'm being very nice. Oh, I like this candidate, because I resonate with him, but that doesn't necessarily he or she carry the skills that I was needed for my business. So I make those mistakes as a founder. But now as an investor or as a coach working with founders, my advice to them is really look at your input-output ratios. Look at what financial situations you're in. Are you able to scale up? And that scale up will move you to a pivotal point that you can scale to a completely new high level, or you just want to scale up for the sake of scaling up. And one of the best way to do it is, again, that to look at your needs and your growth. When you ask for fundraising, and there was always a question asked by the investors, how are you going to spend the capital? Right, so it's on your products, your people, and you probably will have 5 to 10 on your wish list, right? And you think about, you prioritize these items, and what would give you the most value added or competitive edge in the next phase of growth. And that hopefully will give you some guidance.
So how do the investors seize that? That's a very good point that you mentioned, that most of the founders, they just make a breakdown. Okay, we'll spend marketing, we'll spend in tech, we'll spend in operations and all that. That's how they, make these distribution charts and tables and everything, right? So in terms of your opinion, what matters the most to the investors? What matters the most to the other side? The founder is thinking whatever he wants, but what actually matters to the VC before they decide to put in the money? You've been into these conversations, I'm sure. So, yeah.
Right. Now, I have heard different stories, and different VCs have different philosophy when it comes to investing. But I think at the end of the day, it boils down to how many multiples you're going to create for my investment. So I invest $1, how many times you're going to make me in designated period of time, right? So I think that's the fundamental question a lot of founders, or most of the founders, will need to answer before asking for funding. Even you're at a very early stage, if you put together an ambitious business plan, if you put together a very aggressive growth plan, and with the capital, you have proven yourself how the capital was going to help you to scale to the next stage. Great job. And I think by then you probably have a good idea where you should deploy your capital. And once you secure your funding, you probably kind of get a sense what the investor's looking for. But I think financial will be one of the criteria for a lot of VCs now at the moment. But there was always a moral side of it. So sometimes investor invest not just because of the how many multiples they're going to get. They might invest for control, especially for early stage. So I heard one thing, and for me personally as investors as well, we look at companies, it's almost like a bell-shaped curve. So we either invest in a very early stage, which for the growth, and also late stage, which is for the exit. And the messy part is in the middle. So we try to stay away from that as an investor. But I think for both, whatever business you're in, looking at if the companies or investors, they are investing for certain ideas or certain reasons, make sure you know them before you put together a pitch. Some investors are just investing on ideas and control. Some are more on the financial returns. And it is important to know that nowadays, a lot of private companies, they extend their IPO runway. So a lot of companies trying to stay private rather than go public. So sometimes as an investor, they might look for other than the final exit returns. They might look for something. Is it a great idea? Is it disruptive? Is it control?
Yeah, let's be part of it. Yeah. Different perspectives to it. So if I ask you, what impact Gavin Lin brings to the products or startups that he associates with, right? So what kind of funding, what kind of mentorship, what, let's say, all the startups or anyone in the audience who's looking to work on an idea or looking to scale their product, right? What your firm particularly offers. And tell us a little bit about that part.
Right. So there are 4 areas we invest, as I mentioned: AI, FinTech, health tech, and consumer tech, right? So there are basically 2 directions how I look at it. As an investor, AI is almost a trend that you cannot differentiate.
The world is going that side. Yeah.
Companies would somewhat to different degrees have to adopt AI as part of their competitive. So I think that's one thing. And from that perspective, it is important to, it's important for you either you have the tech, well, we don't provide the technical support as investors. Unfortunately, unlike yourself, you have an engineering background, you have the tech background, which I envy. But then I think at the end of the day, you have to convince me as an investor how your business is going to convert my dollar invest to be something more meaningful compared to the other venture that I'm considering. So if you have this idea how the capital converted into AI technology or whatever technology you're in, and be able to bring more value to mankind or to the business, to me, absolutely, I would love to spend a little bit more time in that. I think the second part is also, which that resonates with me very deeply, which is the personal part of investment. We invested the human connectivities. If a business that kind of elevate or champion the ideas that we humans stay as a human, despite what's going on with the technology, we are particularly interested in it. And our belief is, at the end of the day, it's going to be technology plus human. And nowadays, a lot of capital is going into the technology field, which I understand perfectly. But there is another side of the equation, which is human. And I think as an investor, I would love to see a little bit more founders with disruptive ideas that can elevate that human connectivities and make a better world.
Nice. That's great. So you have nearly 2 decades of experience with a lot of diversified fields. What would be your message that you would like to give to the young people who are starting, who have already started working on this amazing era of AI, building things so fast and trying their visions go out in the market? What would be your message to all the aspiring current and future founders?
Do it. I think all really boils down into, we are in an era that we have tremendous opportunities with the use of technology. You can be a business founder without a team. You can be just on yourself running $1 million company, which is very true. And there's a lot of social media content creators. There are a lot of solopreneur doing business at home and just with the help of technology. And that's possible, as opposed to 20 years ago, which could be very challenging. The traditional way of growth is you grow, you hire a team to grow with you. Hopefully one day you have an exit. But nowadays you have the help of technology. I think use it. And if you're young, the biggest asset you have, it's your time. And one of the things that I would not take it too lightly is the idea of compounding. So consistency is super important. If you were a young founder, so you started doing, even your venture might not end up the way that you wanted. That piece of experience is going to be internalized, it will be part of you, regardless what you're going to do in the future. And now, to me, from a macro perspective, you have the best timing. And if you're young, use that. That's an asset.
Yeah, that's great. And I would like to go to the closing. It has been an enlightening discussion. Thank you so much for sharing all these thoughts. Gavin, if I took you back 20 years at the day you started your career, would you choose the same path or what would you do differently?
That's a great question. I think I would. The reason is, despite the fact that we talk about burnouts, the challenges, the peaks and the lows, running of business, I found my 25 years of entrepreneurial journey a super rewarding one. And even during the burnout, and it's actually one of the best things that's happened to me because I have a better understanding of myself. When you run your business, you just know yourself. You know what you're good at. what you are terribly at. And you know the feedback from your team almost instantly. And there is a huge understanding of yourself and what you can do, what you're capable of. So even you're young, you have this brilliant idea, go for it, leverage the resources you have, whatever you have on yourself, friends around you with technology, do it. But one thing I would like to highlight is do your exit plan as well. So
what's the time you need to.
Exactly. And nowadays, I work with a lot of founders or ex-founders whose ventures didn't actually work out as expected, and they were actually thinking to go back to the job market. I genuinely don't think they have any idea. They become irrelevant. And I think new employers look at them in a very different lens for founder candidates or entrepreneurial candidates. That should not be the stopper for you if you want to start your business. But I will highly suggest that young entrepreneur to have your exit plan out before you start it. What is the time frame? How much money, time, efforts you are prepared to give it, and what if?
Yeah, just briefly, how to create that exit plan. Just briefly.
Well, I think you mentioned it very nicely just now. What's your time frame, really? What's your financial commitment? There are founders who overcommit. They borrow money from relatives and
friends, family, and
exactly. And if they got the investors' money, and that's
more pressure.
More pressure. Yeah. So you need, when's your stop line, right? Your constraint. And I think it is more important from a mental perspective. You will need to be aware of when the company does not serve you anymore. This is the question I ask myself every 3 months. This business serves me well. Sometimes you fall out of love from your business. Sometimes market shift. Sometimes there is a disruption. Sometimes you keep doing the same thing that you did 10 years ago, but it doesn't generate the same results and just create more frustration. Every 3 months, I would ask myself the same question. Am I excited doing what I'm doing? And does it give me the kind of sparkle and passion? So I would highly encourage founders to think about it from a wellness perspective, to keep it sustained.
That's great insight. And I think most of the people, they always focus about what. They don't focus about how, like what it took for you to make this. So thank you so much for sharing your amazing story, all the insights about your failures, about your journey. We're a pleasure to have you on the show, and looking forward to potentially collaborate with you. And we'll put your information for our audience. If somebody wants to connect with you, they would definitely reach you.
I will be happy to share my handles with you. And thank you for having me. It's a great conversation.
You're welcome.